Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much to everyone for appearing before us today and sharing your lived experience. I think acquired disabilities are often overlooked and not discussed enough. And we know now that disabilities as a result of accident or illness make up a considerable percentage of people with disabilities, a number which increases with age. Questions for each of the witnesses, if there's time. If not, a written response would be great. First to Mary, you highlight the incredible barriers you faced and the continual need to fight for services most people would consider entirely reasonable and necessary. I think one feature that sticks out in your ordeal is the ongoing lack of coordination and poor communication within the HSE, which results in little or no therapies and lots of waiting lists. Other witnesses have expressed similar experiences. So is it time for people such as Chris to be assigned a single advocate or caseworker who can help coordinate everything and do the heavy lifting for you in terms of arranging care and appointments and things like that? Secondly, can you elaborate on the impact of the lack of access to home care support or to personal assistance services and how increased access could improve the life of your son so he can enjoy life like everyone else? And then thirdly, you describe how there are no appropriate day or resource services for people with neurological disabilities. I'm wondering if you could expand on this and how access to appropriate day services could improve your son's life. And then for Fiona, your description of the massive difference between care you received in the hospital with access to multidisciplinary teams, constant interventions to absolutely nothing at home. I think that cliff face of a lack of care is just unbelievable. I don't know how that's allowed to happen. But again, it's a situation of a kind of absence of joined up thinking and person-centred approach in the HSE. And it's truly shocking. But can you elaborate on the difference that early interventions and supports at home would have made to you and your recovery? And secondly, the unwillingness of the Department of Education to permit you to work part-time and build up to full-time slowly is also disgraceful. The department's actually written to the committee outlining its commitment to the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, but I suppose here we see the reality. So I'm just wondering if you could expand on specifically how they could support you in returning to work. And thirdly, for Fiona, you also highlight the importance of online support groups as conduits of information and assistance. And this is also really common among people appearing before the Committee with Disabilities and their families, who only learn about services and schemes and ways of accessing these through others. You rightly call, I think, on the HSE to run these types of services. So I just wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on that for the committee. And finally, just a quick question for Chris. You mentioned how the predicted increase.
Okay, Holly, yeah. Thank you. That's very interesting because
just a quick question for Chris. You mentioned how the predicted increase.
Okay, Holly, yeah. Thank you. That's very interesting because about the management, one person responsible, taking responsibility for the I suppose, coordination and management of the person's services, the case, as it were. Interestingly, where our son lives, it's not where I live actually, even though it's quite near, there is an ABI case manager, which is quite extraordinary. We also have a care manager. Now, the ABI case manager is a standalone service, and because there aren't ABI services that meet our son's needs, it's difficult to see the role that they play. But there is some connection there because there is some training with carers in acquired brain injury, online training sessions every month for a period of maybe 6 weeks, something like that. So that happens, and it's like a little standalone piece, right? And the ABI case manager is involved, say, in a case review. They'll come to a case review, but they don't have an overall remit. And you have a care manager then. I bring in the home support here because, as I said, we struggled doing this ourselves. Then we struggled with a little bit of support, and gradually, when we were no longer able to provide the level of support needed, our son was provided with a package of care after a long, tedious process. And there's a care manager, an SRN, who is responsible for the medical end and overseeing that area. And that's that piece. And yet there's no bringing of this together in one place. And the only time we get to discuss in one place is we have a review. And as I've said, we've had the online reviews, which are a bit unsatisfactory, and it's difficult for everyone and to get people to the table, because I would prefer if a physiotherapist was out doing physiotherapy with a patient than spending time doing an hour's meeting with our son. I understand that. But they might send in a report or so on. But it's difficult to get everyone together. There isn't any one person. There's data protection issues. There are patient-client confidentiality, say with Beaumont Hospital and liaising with there. And then the GP, you have all these pieces, and they're all moving around, but there's no one person who can. I don't think is possible for them, given the restrictions around all those areas, to get terribly involved and find out all the information that they need to know. And I often find myself back in the fray again, because we are have the legal responsibility. Do you understand? In decision making. Say if it comes down to changing medications or epilepsy medications, we would be, because of our background, and you must remember people working with our son now wouldn't know all of the things we'd know and the difficulties he's had with particular medications or issues in the past. So the information that we have sits there, and you couldn't possibly put it on paper. I don't think who would have the time to read it even. So there isn't that way of managing that one person can do all of that, given all those restrictions. So I think that covers the home support and that area of the case manager's role and how difficult it is. And the other piece is around the day services. Yeah, there has never been, and I don't know when it will ever happen, so a day service that is geared to people with brain injury, with acquired brain injury, and that area of, acquired disability. And it's badly needed because it would provide structure and a centre of focus, where people could, maybe these case managers could be meeting, talking to other people. There could be more, an opportunity to do more, and our son's life would be greatly improved. Because I think in a centre like that, you could have physio and OT. There was an attempt to do that, but after 2008, there was a centre where they had physical and sensory disability services. So that was a wide range. It wasn't specific ABI, but it was a wide range. But they did have physio and OT there, during the week. But that was brought back into clinical services then, the HSE, when the services went pear-shaped back after 2008, and that never recovered. It never was restored to what it had been previously. So a day service could incorporate a lot of those things, and it isn't there. It just isn't there. And as I refer to those reports, the National Rehabilitation Strategy, I mean, where on earth is it,
Okay, thank you. Fiona?
Thank you. I think your first question was about the care received in hospital versus nothing, and kind of highlighting the lack of care once you're discharged from hospital. I suppose the first thing is we didn't quite realise what was wrong with me, because you know, when you're in hospital, they're using medical terms and you're not fully with it either, I suppose, is another issue. And you're discharged, and yes, you're discharged, and you're kind of like, oh, I must be better, this is fine, and you're discharged home into an environment that you're familiar with, but you might not really remember how to use. Like you basically, you have to relearn an awful lot of things. And when you're discharged, you kind of think that the reason that you're discharged is that you're better. It's probably a lot to do with the lack of funding and beds and all that kind of stuff. But it's more, I would imagine as well, they've kind of gotten your medication under control, and there's not that much more they could possibly do with you in hospital versus someone, say, coming in from a road traffic accident or has had an operation that needs your bed a bit more. The early intervention, I suppose, like if I had been discharged, like no one in the community knew, say the nursing community or whatever it is, knew that I'd been discharged. I don't kind of understand why there's no, say, social worker or overall community team where they would get a notification from the hospital saying, Fiona's 33, she's been discharged with a stroke. In 3 days' time, can you call into the house and see how they're getting on, what needs to be done? Like, I was discharged into my mum's care. My mum has no medical background at all whatsoever. She has her own medical issues. She didn't kind of realise what needed to be done, I suppose. She was still getting over the trauma of finding me having a seizure on the floor and dealing with all that, and then sitting beside me for the next 10 days in hospital and the worry of having to get over that. And then upon discharge, the only kind of real guidance she was given was how to use this pen that if I was to have another seizure, it would stop me having a seizure. And that was it. There was no, oh, she mightn't be able to this or she mightn't be able to that, or like all these little things that I suppose, because when you're working in the medical field, you're so used to dealing with these every single day, you forget that once the person leaves here, they're lost. And yes, they do say, oh, sure, give us a call at any time. But you're kind of going, is this a stupid question? Or they're so busy, am I bothering them? And you don't want to be taking up time for nursing staff and things like that. I think as well, everyone should get assessed when they leave. As in, they do like a physical assessment and speech and language assessment, and they were like making me walk up a set of stairs and checking if I could swallow and things like that. But in 3 months' time, like when you're beginning to get better and you realise that you thought you were 100% and you were completely doolally, like I wasn't making any sense, but in my head I was making sense. And again, maybe 6 months later, because as you get better, the deficits kind of come out a little bit more. You've dealt with the stuff that's come up straight away. Like you've dealt with the, oh, I don't even know, I don't remember how to have a cup of tea. So you have to relearn how to boil the kettle and get remember where the cups are and that kind of stuff. So as things start to kind of go from relearning to becoming automatic again, other things then start to show up as issues. So like it wouldn't have shown up my inability to read for a long time because I just was so tired from having to do all the normal getting dressed, getting showered, brushing my teeth, going for a 5-minute walk. That took so long out of my day that I was exhausted, that I didn't know that I couldn't read. So those kind of things might not show up initially. And Mary did mention that earlier as well. It's over the years as well for her son, things kind of crop up that you need check-ins every now and again. And I know in an ideal world, wouldn't it be great where everyone gets checked in on every 6 months? Like it's highly unlikely, but there has to be some sort of things put in place, because the things that are cropping up for me now are absolutely completely different than what I needed initially. I'm still with the National Rehabilitation Hospital, which is good. As Mary said, you kind of go in, you might do a course for 6 weeks, and you're kind of let off again for a few months, and they might call you back in again. So like I've done a course, it was basically on what happens when you have a brain injury, that you're relearning how to do stuff, your neurons are kind of finding different pathways and things like that. And then another one, it might have been trying to help with my organisational skills. And one that I've done a good few months back, April maybe, was about reading and trying to kind of, if I was reading, to make a spider diagram, like say the main characters and this person works as a teacher and their mum is called whatever and their sister's called whatever, so that if I was reading, I'm like, oh, what's that person again? I could just look at it, quick reminder, and continue with the story.